that you've also written about things that aren't along all of those themes, right? So, for example, the one about Churchill's headmaster that was very, very interesting. You mentioned the Bowden thing, although there's some elements that cross over. But you mentioned the one that's upcoming, the one about Quakers.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to ask you about this because I find it both funny and genuinely interesting. When a friend of mine first said, Ed Dutton's talking about doing a book about the Quaker question, I was like, wow, really? Okay, that's piqued my interest. So can you tell me a little bit about what's going to be in that, if it's not too much of a spoiler?
The QQ.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, basically, it's what was it? What was it? It was inspired by it's this constant, in our circles. There is this sociolect words like red-pilled and blue-pilled and based and also leftoid and rightoid, and it's this idea that whenever we discuss anything online, anything about the causes of problems in the UK at the moment, the causes of problems in Britain, why the stabbing happened at Huntingdon, whatever it is, eventually there will always be someone who will just say, the Jew! It's the Jew! It's the Jew! Why don't you name the Jew? Why are you scared to name the Jew? Whatever it is, there's like a correlation of -2 between religion and intelligence. Yeah, because of the Jew! And like whatever, it doesn't matter what it is. Oh, the dinosaurs were wiped out by a comet 66 million years ago. No, they weren't. It was the Jew. Like whatever it is, it's always the Jew. Me and my colleague, it was more his idea really, J.O.A. Rayner Hills. We think about it like, no, it's not the Jew. I mean, there's Jewish people who are left wing, and yes, it's true that the majority of Jews in America do vote Democrat, and it makes sense that if you're a minority, the last thing you want is a nationalist government. That's not good for you. That's why white people in Zimbabwe went from voting for Ian Smith to voting for Morgan Tsvangirai, the trade unionist leader for Democratic Change, when Robert Mugabe became a black nationalist. So there's of course Jews. I would expect Jews to be to be overall more left wing. That makes sense. And also their niche in a way would be to be sort of outsiders, but sort of not outsiders, and therefore they'd be able to see the essence of things perhaps more easily. And I would expect that. That doesn't bother me. But you also get Jewish people that do base things. So, for example, Professor Amy Wax, I've had on my channel. She's extremely based. They're trying to get rid of her from the University of Pennsylvania Law School for just basically saying facts, whatever. And there's Paul Gottfried of Chronicles, who wrote the key text on multiculturalism as a theocracy. Okay, whatever. So there's various, and you can point to lots and lots of good things that the Jews have done in terms of Nobel Prizes for science and discoveries and all this kind of stuff. And my colleague Richard Lynn, who is dead now, did a book called A Chosen People, where he looked at the achievement quotient of Ashkenazi Jews in various areas, and it's quite stunning. So probably because they have a higher average IQ of 5 or 10 points than Europeans. Because the Quakers, everything you can think of that is subversive, that is left wing, everything has got a large organized group of Quakery behind it. Every single time.
The Quakers, just quickly to say,
men having votes so that we end up with socialism and chaos. Who campaigned for universal suffrage? The Quaker. Women having the vote so that we can't even talk about logical things even at university. Who was behind that? The Quaker. Vegetarianism, the Quakers. Opposing war even though it would involve their own country being invaded, the Quakers. Getting rid of corporal punishment in schools, the Quakers. Getting rid of the death penalty for murder, the Quakers. Making prisons into holiday camps, the Quakers. Being really kind to your enemies and whatever. Okay, abolishing slavery, some would call it. But the point is that it was the Quakers. Whatever it is, without exception. I mean, at the moment, 10 Quakers were arrested recently because they were organizing a violent terrorist activity in relation to some kind of pro-Palestine march or whatever. And the head of the Quakers said these people are not being allowed to carry out their faith. And by their faith, he meant engaging in violent terrorist action. Breaking into airports and smashing stuff up, the Quakers. Who funds Hope Not Hate? The Joseph Rowntree Trust. Joseph Rowntree, the Quakers. And this idea, the banks, the Jewish bankers. No, the Jewish bankers, yeah, fine. What about the Quaker bankers? What about Barclays Bank? Who were the banks that made all their money on the back of slavery, by the way? The Quakers. Every single time.
For the international Quaker. I mean, for anyone who might not know, there might be some people out there who don't know, the Quakers are a sect of Christianity, right? And they've been around since, what, the 17th century? Is it?
Sort of. I mean, is it Christianity? They believe in what they call the inner light. So if you are, oh, by the way, anything else? I mean, like, you know how like you get these nude protests with these groups like Femen or whatever, where they write, you know, freedom on their tits. The Quakers innovated that. In 1654, a Quaker woman goes into Westminster Hall where Cromwell is worshipping and just gets all her clothes off and runs around screaming. The Quakers. I mean, also, with regard to the Jews, why are the Jews in England at all, by the way, if you're going to be a rightoid? Do you think because Cromwell let them in? Why did he let them in? Because he was influenced by the Quakers and the Quakers told him to. And then the Quakers went into Europe and helped bring, if you're going to, the Quakers. It's always the Quakers.
I mean, why? But to be serious, and not that you're not being serious, everything you've said there is a matter of record. But why then? Why is that? Because Quakers, on a shallow level, people might think of Quakers as like something akin to the Amish, some sort of adjacent to Puritanism, that sort of strand. So where does this subversion then come from?
I suppose. Yeah. The interesting point you mentioned the Amish. The Amish were, of course, in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn, who was a Quaker convert. And there was structural Pennsylvania after William Penn, who was a Quaker, and it was founded as a Quaker state under Quaker rules with Quaker laws. And then there was a war with France between the British and as of course it was part of Britain at the time, and the French. And so then, and the French allied with the Native Americans, and then they invaded Pennsylvania. And of course, the Quakers did. The Quaker government just said, "Oh, we can't do anything. We can't fight. We can't fight because we're pacifists. We're pacifists." And so then you've got the whole of of Pennsylvania being overrun by enemy soldiers, and the Quaker government just doing nothing.
For what end, though? That doesn't. That's no survival instincts there, is there? Why would you do that?
Sorry.
Well, why would you do that? Why would you allow yourself to be overrun? There's no survival instinct there.
In answer to why it happens, the Amish have found a similar but not exactly the same because they're more insular kind of niche. We talked about earlier about a K strategy, a harsh yet stable ecology. And in that ecology, you have to find a niche, and you find a niche at an individual level. We've all found to varying degrees niches via which we earn money and live our lives and so on. And that's also true of groups. And so, obviously, in medieval Europe, the Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews found a niche of engaging in usury because Christians weren't supposed to do that, and then from there, finance. And then you end up with a trusted community. And this is very important when you're dealing with loans and things, that you've got to be able to trust each other, really trust each other, and know you believe in the same things and that you are a persecuted minority. So you have a sense of being bonded and being a band of brothers and high trust. And that's quite important for banking to work. And I don't think it's a coincidence, by the way, that therefore the Quakers, who also were excluded from the professions and so on because they weren't Anglican, did exactly the same thing, banking and business, exactly the same thing, which is based around being a minority group with very, very high trust, so that you can engage in these activities and not be robbed because you know you can trust each other because your fellow friends. So broadly, it's a matter of finding a niche. And there's enough I mean, yes, we were under harsh Darwinian selection or whatever until 1800, and the child mortality rate was 50%. But there's enough room in that for there to be variance, and there's enough room in that for there to be niches. And so, even as a sort of a psychopath, you can kind of find a niche. In a sense, you could argue witches found a niche as sort of healers and folk healers and things like that. They found a kind of a niche within society via which they survived, although they were persecuted. And the Quakers, well, what is the Quaker niche? It's this idea that basically, in a context in which there's harsh conditions, and in a context in which we know there's a correlation between socioeconomic status and passing on your genes, then the niche they find is being middle class people, or whatever they are, right? But virtue signaling such that they get slightly higher up and have slightly, more money, and so sort of more of their offspring survive. But also their specific sub niche is they're basically kind of cowards, and so they don't want the conflict, because that could involve conflict, couldn't it? If you're competing against other people, but you avoid the conflict by severely virtue signaling and going on about how nice you are and how peaceable you are and whatever, and thus you get past the antennae of people that would see you as a competitor by just seeming so nice. Whereas in reality you're not nice, and in reality you're extremely selfish, and you're just doing it for yourself, and so you can kind of feel good about yourself. And that's what they need to do, the Quakers. They just need to virtue signal all the time, and all the time feel that they're morally superior to others, but do so in a way that it also crosses over with being pacifist, and I will virtue signal so much that I won't even fight in the army, and I'll go to prison. And so, but they do so. In doing so, they get away with subverting everything in order to virtue signal. Everything tradition, everything, absolutely everything, right from the beginning. Taking oaths, doffing your hat, using the correct form of the word "you" to your social superiors. Absolutely everything they subvert in favor of signaling equality and harm avoidance. They are the beginnings of woke. They are the first woke. Anything, even in wokeness, the concept of the inner light. This is this idea that essentially you are God. If you are a Quaker and you've heard Quaker preaching, the inner light is in you, i.e. God is in you, and that inner light can be used to justify anything. Oh, I broke into an airport and smashed up a plane. I was following my inner light. And that's what they believe. Now, it seems to me to be very similar to someone saying, I am a woman. I believe I am. My inner self tells me that I am. It's very similar to saying we are all gods, and I am that I am, and I define myself, and I create what I am. And the only devils are these bad gods that don't accept that I can do that. And that's what Quakerism is central to Quakerism. This notion of that you can do anything you want if your inner light tells you this, and that inner light is God. God is in you. And so I thought this was fascinating, and so we've written this very short book about it. But yeah, that's it. The Quaker question, the QQ. And you need to understand, your rightoid friend who's a bit schizophrenic and spends all his time on Twitter just going on and on about the Jew, and like, even in the Lotus Eaters, when I was on there a few weeks ago, whenever it was, a week ago, we got a question from somebody, the Jew, and it's not okay. That is the if we could, frankly, well, no, I better be careful what I say. But everything bad. I can't think of what have the Quakers done for us. Everything bad, everything subversive, everything anti-nationalism, everything like that. Quakers, what have they actually done for us? Sweet bagpuss.
I was going to say there is the oats.
No, everyone says that. It's getting quite irritating now.
I said that to you in the office. I know, and you said no.
No, it's not. That was a marketing campaign by the people that were because the Quakers were seen as so sort of wholesome and associated basically with the Amish. and Pennsylvania. So no, there's not the oats. There's fruit with Rowntree's, Cadbury. So basically chocolate, sweets. Oliver Postgate, who did Bagpuss and Ivor the Engine and wholesome things like that. I can't have anything bad to say about him. If I could sort of praise him in the book. And then there's, I don't know, then it's just everything left wing. Carla Denyer, the leader of the Green Party in Parliament, Quaker, obviously.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Of course, what else would she be? You know, every left wing, Paul Eddington out of The Good Life, who campaigned for left wing acting, whatever policies, Quaker. I can get you a list if you want. But there's the influence, this tiny little sect of a few 100,000 people, Fry's chocolate, Fry's Turkish Delight. There you go, that's the other one, Fry's. Maiden name Gurney's Bank. So yeah, their influence has been enormous, and it's a sort of best kept secret, really. Like
Richard Nixon was a Quaker, wasn't he?
He was a Quaker, yeah. He was brought up a Quaker, but he wasn't a very active one. I mean, he didn't really believe it. And David Starkey was brought up a Quaker as well. But yeah, but again, not very. I mean, you should go to their weddings if you want a boring time. They get married in silence. So you just go in. I went to one when I was 12. In fact, it was the first wedding I ever went to. It was my dad's colleague, and my dad's colleague was like Indian, British, or whatever. And the wife, I think it must have been that the wife was Quaker, and so it was a Quaker meeting house in Sutton, in Surrey, and half the family were Norwegian, and basically a dominant, narcissistic Englishman who would sit in silence. And every so often, a dominant narcissistic Englishman who was a Quaker would get up and say something trite, like, "Oh, well, yeah, I think the journey that you're going on is amazing. And I'm very envious of anyone that can love someone else so strongly they can go on that journey," or some shit like that. And then he'd sit down. And then the mother-in-law, who purity signaled by putting no effort into her appearance, even on her daughter's wedding day, just got up and went, hold, to translate, because she was Norwegian, you see, the mother-in-law, the wife was Norwegian. So to translate it to these Norwegians, hold. And that was it. And it was just that for an hour. And then at the end of that silent hour, then they were married. And yeah, it was very dull.
That sounds really boring.
It was very boring. And in those days, you didn't have a mobile phone or whatever. It's 1993, so I couldn't get a mobile phone out, and none of that. Couldn't even play that
game. Yeah,
it wasn't even a primitive mobile phone. It wasn't even Snake. That didn't try about for another sort of 8 years. It was